So hello, my colleagues, and I hope everyone had a great weekend. What we're going to look at now is we basically did a lot of work on valuing bonds, and now we're going to look at Chapter 9, which is the counterpart is valuing stocks. How does one put a price on stocks? How do we value stocks? And again, we're going to turn to the law of one price, which basically is all over, finance, the underpinning theory, which implies that the price of a security should equal the present value of the expected cash flows an investor will receive from owning it, right? And we've seen that on many, many areas already. So we're going to apply this idea now, as they say, to stocks, right? So we're going to look at stocks. So to value a stock, we need to know the expected cash flows an investor will receive and the appropriate cost of capital. And this is the most important part, getting that appropriate cost of capital, right, with which to discount the cash flows. Both of these quantities can be challenging to estimate, and many of the details needed to do so will be developed throughout the remainder of the text. All right, so we're going to look at stock valuation now. All right, so of course, stocks, so we're going to talk about dividends and capital gains, right? Dividends are when you get like a check every 3 months from the stock you own, if they pay dividends, right? And capital gains is if the stock does go up, and it could be capital losses too if the stock goes down. And we're going to look at the dividend discount model of stock valuation. This is the big model that we'll look at. Okay. All right. And then there's other methods, which Chapter 8 will have basically, we use some stuff from Chapter 8 to value stocks based on free cash flows. We're not going to spend too much time on that. All right, so valuation is a big topic in finance. It's a whole general topic and stuff. You can take like courses on valuation. So just want to say that. Sorry about that. I'm having some technical problem. I was having some technical problems with my mouse. So we're going to look at basically how stock prices vary with over time with different cash flows and how they affect us all. All right, so the first thing we're going to look at is the dividend discount model. All right, and this is probably one of the most important models, even though it's maybe not realistic in life. But so the law of one price, again, we go back to the law of one price, and that implies that to value any security, we must determine the expected cash flows an investor will receive from owning it. All right, and we've known that. That's been repeated many times. Thus, we begin our analysis of stock valuation by considering the cash flows for an investor with a 1-year investment horizon. So that's what we're going to look at first. We then consider the perspectives of investors with longer investment horizons, right? And then using all these results we talked about above there, we're going to use this result to derive the dividend discount model for valuing a share of stock, okay? All right, so here's a 1-year investor, okay? Here's a 1-year investor, all right? And so there were two potential sources of cash flows from the stock, as we kind of said. Dividends and the possibility that the stocks will rise or go down in the future dates, right? So the dividends and from selling the stock will depend on the investor's investment horizon. Let's begin by considering, I will look at the perspective of a 1-year investor. So here he is, so here's the timeline again, right? So here he is paying for the share, right? And then at the end of 1 year, he gets his dividend and he gets his, at the new price, assuming it went up, right? Or it could have gone down also, right? So we don't know. So we're going to make, and again, they make an assumption here to simplify things, that all dividends are paid at the end of the year. Okay, so they make a dividend, that all dividends. All right. So basically, what they're going to say here now is we have to define an equity cost of capital, right? So future dividend payments and stock price in the timeline above are not known, of course, with any certainty. So there's expectations we have, though, right? The investment will be willing to buy the stock at today's price as long as the net present value of the transaction is not negative. That is, as long as the current price does not exceed the present value of the expected future dividends and sale price. Because these cash flows are risky, we cannot compute their present value using the risk-free interest rate. So that's got to go away now, right? So goodbye to that with stocks. Instead, we must discount them based on the equity, and this is the important word, right? The equity cost of capital for the stock, right? So we have to use the equity cost of capital, which is the expected return of other investments available in the market with equivalent risk to the firm's shares. So doing so leads to the following, and again, it's this whole idea of equivalent risk. How does one define that? That's not an easy thing. I mean, how do you define that? Leads to the following conditions under which an investor would be willing to buy the stock. The price has got to be less than what the cash flows are, the present value of the cash flows, okay? And then you say, but again, I've never done that kind of math to determine if I should buy a stock, all right? I pretty much go by my gut instinct. Similarly, for an investor to be willing to sell the stock, so here's the other side of the coin. And again, I don't know anybody who's done that. But because for every buyer of the stock there must be a seller, both equations must hold, and therefore the stock price should satisfy. So here's the stock price that, if you apply both equations above, and this is an important equation 9.1. In a competitive market, buying or selling a share of stock must be a zero non-present value investment opportunity. Right? All right, there's got to be a price. Either you gain or you lose. Not very many people will break even. Right? All right, so we're going to talk about dividend yields, capital gains, and total returns. If we look at equation 9.1, if we multiply it by 1 plus the cost of the equity cost of capital and divide by P0, and then we subtract 1 from both sides, we will get the total return. So the right-hand side, so they manipulate this equation, right? And here's the total return. And here's the dividend yield. Here's what you get from the dividend, right? The yield. And here's what you get. Capital gain. It says, right, gain or loss, right? That could be a gain or a loss. We don't know that. So here's the dividends yield, and here's the capital gain rate, which we said, right? And the sum of those two give us the total return of the stock. All right. So there were some stocks that don't pay dividends, such as Google, and I own Amazon.com also. They don't. In other words, the expected total return of the stock should equal the expected return of other investments available in the market with equivalent risk. All right. So, and again, how does one define the equivalent risk? Maybe you got to do some research. So here's a nice example, and they just simply do a little mathematical exercise here to just plug in some numbers. All right, 8.5%, $70 a share right there. 8.5% expected return goes in there, and the dividends were $1.60, and Walgreens dividend yield is 2.42%, and the capital gain rate is 6.08. Okay. So their expected total return is 6.08% total. Right? If you just, I'm sorry, 8.5%, right? which is the number here, right? So there's the 8.5, and it comes out to that. So, all right. So basically, here in your book here, they talk about short sales, which is selling stock you don't own. So you're going to sell stock you really don't own. Okay, and you heard about this with the computer GameStop, the computer company that had a lot of press lately. Okay, you hope to buy it back at a cheaper price in the future, but as you saw, they played a lot of games with the short sellers. So the short sellers are making a lot of money, especially these days now. The Nasdaq stocks are really dropping. Okay, so here's the cash flows associated with a short sale. All right, so you can see that. So here's the steps that here's John Doe's account, right? And you can see broker borrows a share and sells it, and basically he's borrowing it from John Doe's account, I believe. And basically the dividend is paid, and broker buys a share and returns it, and he credits John Doe's account. All right. And there's a little blurb here about short sellers and everything. So the firm must pay its shareholders a return commensurate with the return they can earn elsewhere while taking the same risk. If the stock offered a higher return than other securities with the same risk, investors would sell those other investments and buy the stock instead. So equation 9.2 was what we looked at previously, right? So here was equation 9.2, right? There was equation 9.2. So, but anyway, this is the mechanics of a short sale. All right, so we just did a simple problem with a single year. Now we should look at someone who's going to invest long term, which is what I do, multi-year, right? Multi-year. So we'll pick up here next time. All right.